sometimes when you train, you're left with feelings of just difficulty. You struggle. You feel like your self-worth isn't good. You feel like there's trouble making it further, making progress. You just don't feel like you're gonna make it over this hump, that this is the hump, this is the one. It's time to call it. This has been on my mind a lot because sometimes we have things that set us back, and I'm really excited to have a couple people here to talk about these times because we all go through them. Everybody faces it. You feel maybe alone when you do, and you feel like nobody else feels this way, but they do. And so today I'm joined with Dan Bernardo, well within martial arts, the martial calligrapher, incredible guy, and Tuari Dawson, the invisible sensei. And I'm incredibly excited to sit down and talk to you guys. We get to chat sometimes. There were a couple people that were going to join us too, but I'm excited that at least you guys were able to make it. And I'm excited to hear your input, things that you've struggled with, ways that you've handled that. Because we've all been there. We've talked about it. We've been there.
Hey, bro, first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be in your company, and it is with the martial calligrapher, Dan. It's great to spend time with friends. I think what comes to mind, especially with regards to your intro, is that I think in and throughout our martial arts experience, like I'm coming up on 47 years. One of the biggest things, and I say that from the perspective of not to say, oh, look how long I've been training, but to say that, there are things which, irrespective of whether you've been in it for 10 years, 3 years, 60, 70 years, whatever it is, I think there are contributing factors to the quality of what we do. And I think that when I started, it was really for the love of it. I saw something that I really enjoyed doing, and I wasn't a huge sports person in the sense that I wasn't into the sports which are really popular in New Zealand. I kind of always liked artistic and creative pursuits, and I liked singular pursuits. And so the idea of pursuing something that I loved for the sake of doing it, that didn't have a clear sporting outcome in terms of trophies or accolades or those sorts of things, that wasn't a huge part of it for me, was kind of really strange in the community that I came up in, that I live in. And so the first barrier, I guess, was people kind of seeing it as something kind of silly and kind of seeing it as something really niche and kind of having their own opinions about it. So I guess the first barrier for me was overcoming that and what I felt emotionally about myself. Because I think when people don't take what you do seriously and they tend to deride it, or it becomes a subject of fun, it can run the risk of, for me at least, me taking myself a lot less seriously and seeing myself as something of a joke, or what I do has no value. And I think that was the first thing. I think that also a large part of it for me has always been a sense of social anxiety. I have lived with depression like a lot of folks for most of my life, although in the early years I didn't know what that was. And I think with martial arts now, since the 2000s, with the advent, we were talking about it prior to you starting, the impact of social media, in that we are constantly bombarded with images of what we're not, of how unflexible, unfit, how abdominal muscle having we may be, fantastic technicians, incredible people who are doing all these amazing things. And you're constantly bombarded with, oh my gosh, I am so inadequate. I think you add to that things like injuries. The physical injuries kind of tend to clarify in a lot of ways whether or not you're going to continue on this, because I think that it's in those times when you've really got to figure out, why the heck am I doing this? Why do I want to continue doing something that ostensibly is jumping around in pajamas kicking, punching, using weapons that no one uses anymore, choking, rolling around on mats, getting hurt, traveling to tournaments, traveling to training sessions, training people, in the dead of winter, getting all these injuries. And I suppose for me, the biggest burden, the biggest difficulty has been to overcome the idea that I am not who I want to be, and that who I want to be gets closer to who I am the more I practice. And when you take away the more I practice, the opportunity to continue to make that journey, especially with regards to having a physical skill, it then eats into my self-worth, but incredibly, it can be one of the biggest learning opportunities, and it can really clarify and galvanize our reasons for doing it. I love doing it. I love training, but more importantly, I love the friends like yourself, like Dan, like our Mando Chat brothers, like Josh and Michael, and all those wonderful people in our community who are really good people, supportive, and just trying to do this thing. And I think it's really easy to not reach out and look for things like the other morning, Ken, I was training. When I'm away, I put on your podcast and I train in my hotel room. I move my little tables and all the rest of it, and I always take my gi, and I was listening to it in the morning. Having an opportunity to see the stuff that Dan does in his community, because that's what his martial life dictates that he does. Those things, those people, the people in our community, are incredibly positive people and fun, imaginative, creative, coming from so many different backgrounds and stories. So I'm really inspired by that. But I think it is so easy to get into a negative mind space and to start basically hating ourselves. For me, I've been there where I'm going, oh my gosh, I can't even hit a horse riding stance. I can't do shikodachi. I can't do a spinning hook kick. And I'm going, oh my gosh, in the realm of things, in the scheme of things, is that how I rate myself, by my ability to do a technique that I probably never use or make work? So right. I think that,
and you'll definitely maybe never always be able to do. Right?
Yeah. And then you get to a point where you go,
the challenge that we have sometimes is we know that.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
There's,
I know that
there's going to come a time when we can't do these things.
Exactly. And look, I realize that I have waffled for long enough, but I think what in essence what you're saying, Ken, and the most important thing is for us to put out as much positivity and sometimes be vulnerable as well. Say, look, I'm not handling this. I'm finding this really hard, and reaching out to other people. And if people can't be down with that, if people are not down with vulnerability, then that's cool, man. Do what you do. But I know that when I have a problem, and I both of you guys, I've reached out to, and others in our community on a regular basis, because I've had something going on in terms of martial arts, something going on in terms of my self-esteem or whatever. And you guys have always been there. That's who I want in my life. That's who I want to surround myself with. So I think have a think about what you're taking in. What are you watching? What are you listening to? Who are you listening to? And who are you surrounding yourself with? Because I think therein a lot of times lies the healing. If you can hang with people and say, actually, I'm feeling like crap. I'm not dealing. I don't know what comes next. Then that's where real healing, and in terms of longevity, that's where that stuff kind of happens.
Man, you hit on something so powerful a second ago. Like a couple, they kind of go together. This idea of knowing who you want to be, especially in the physical pursuits, knowing who you want to be, trying to be that thing, knowing how far away you are from it, even though, if we're honest, it's constantly moving goalposts. So like we keep moving it. As soon as we can kind of do it, then we move that goalpost to how like we do it naturally. We continue to do it. We want to be better. But you don't think about that negative side of when you're not doing it, or you're not able to pursue it to fully for whatever reason, then you're not who you want to be. And will you ever get to be who you want to be? Because is there going to be enough time to do that? I had a student on the mat today that kind of said that, like, hey, I'm having to sit out for health reasons, this kind of stuff. And I know that that's going to be holding me back. And we had to kind of talk a little bit about, but you're here, you're training, you're watching, you're taking notes, you're asking really good questions. You might not be making the progress that you think you want to make, but you're making more progress than you realize, and you're definitely making more progress than you would if you weren't doing those things. But you said something really interesting when you talked about how you like the singular pursuits, which I think we all do. I think most people in the martial arts like that singular pursuit. But I think it really creates that opportunity for you to get lost and to feel lost and to really look at the outside to find where value is, because the only thing you have to know if you're better is measuring yourself against, it's not the only thing, but you do it easy. You measure yourself against where you want to be. Somebody did something really cool that you want to be able to do. Maybe it's just your teacher, right? Your instructor, or could have been Instagram, which, I mean, let's not talk about how the social media, when you talk about what are you watching and what are you looking at, what are you listening to, and also like the other part of that is how much production or singular moments were crafted for that particular view. Because just because you saw it and it looked really cool doesn't mean that was a real moment, or that usually we erase what it takes to get there, right? So you see somebody do an amazing pad drill and they're just like lightning fast and they look so cool, and you're like, man, that thing was like 17 moves. It was so impressive how agile and coordinated they were. But what they're not showing you is the like 6 weeks it took of them doing that at the end of every class just to get a little bit better until they could finally record it and show it. And we're doing those same things, but we see all the times that we didn't do it. We didn't make it. We couldn't accomplish what we wanted to accomplish. And if we showed that, how vulnerable or how scary would it feel? And because it's a singular pursuit, we're constantly, it's hard to see our own progress when other people don't know what we're trying to do. And I think when we be vulnerable, I think sometimes we need to communicate where we're trying to go, what we're trying to accomplish, why we don't feel like we're getting there, what we think it'll take to get us there with these people that we trust. Because you're right, surround yourself with people. But also don't be afraid to let them know what you're trying to accomplish so they can reinforce when they see you doing it. It's pretty amazing. I've had a lot of weird thoughts about rank lately. I went totally away from it, white belt, black belt, and then obviously I'm coming back to having some colored belts and stripes and stuff. And part of that was that singular part that if you don't have that driving force, it's so hard to see your own value, your own progress. Sometimes it feels awfully good when other people see it for you and let you know that you've made some leaps that you didn't, that just didn't stand out. Dan, what do you think?
I think also too. I also think that like in my conversations with Dan and yourself and with amongst all of us, I think also too we understand what a grade is and what a grade isn't. That we know. I think that I've talked. We've talked to Dan, and I think it's about every time you grade someone, in terms of yourself or someone else, you're hopefully grading that person from where they've come from, not from some aesthetic choice or kind of cookie cutter mentality. They must do this and this and this. I'm sorry, Dan. I'm rabbiting, brother. You must have some thoughts.
No, you can go on and on. I think that you guys are far better spoken about this than I am. I've never really had as serious of an injury as you can. I can't imagine what you're going through, really. I've had a few injuries here and there. I've had a few setbacks here and there, but the majority of the time, for me, my struggle with my own training is from a place of insecurity, meaning I am always stuck at this place where I don't feel like I am making someone proud. And I know that that's super complicated and I could go in 5 million different ways with that.
Look, bro, straight up
I've
on
never
that.
felt
Just quick one. Bro, I'm proud to be, I'm totally proud of you, brother. I see your stuff and the way you do it and why you do it, more importantly. And I'm going, I'm accruing esteem to my name just by knowing I'm super proud of what you do, bro. Just FYI. Sorry.
Well, thank you. But, you know, there's always this point where you're not sure whether or not your instructor is proud of you. There's points where you're not sure whether or not, like I still, and I'm going to say this out loud, I still have nightmares where I go back to my foundation teacher's school and I walk in and he shakes his head at me. Like I struggle with that more than anything else than any physical technique. I'm the kind of person where I can watch somebody do something and I can pretty much copy it. I'm a visual learner. I can do that, right? I've always been good. I've never been the greatest. I've never been the best. I've never been amazing. But I've always been good. And I don't say that from a point of ego. I say that because that level of understanding means that I never know whether or not I can be better. I never know whether or not I should be better. I never know whether or not what I'm doing, right? Like I had a conversation with a guy today, good friend, amazing martial artist, one of the best martial artists I've ever met. His name's Mike Panula. And we were talking about some questions that I had about my own lineage and about how some certain things are done. And I feel almost like I can't teach it because I don't know whether or not it's good. I don't know whether or not it's real. I don't know whether or not it is functionally efficient. I don't know whether or not it actually does follow the path that it's supposed to follow. So like, I feel like I almost have to reach out to people in those realms and like get their permission, right? So like, this is really how I struggle mostly. I know what I like. I know what I want to be. But it's that imposter syndrome that we were talking about earlier. I don't know whether or not I am even worth being what I want to be. That's my biggest issue. Now,
Dang.
Whether or not, you know, like, for instance, if I do get injured, which happens, right? I throw my back out probably once every 2 months. And I walk into the dojo and I'm like, okay, you demonstrate this, right? And I know that that's because I have weak hamstrings and I have, you know, a weak lower back and I have all these problems. And I try to work on the problems, but it seems like I just can't get rid of my back problems, right? Like, so it's just So these sorts of things, right? When I get to the point, and I think this is where I'm trying to steer myself here. We all have this idea, this vision of what we want to be. And we've talked about that before. If we can't be that, then what are we? Yet, when we get to the point where we realize that we are actually already what we want to be, because in our brain, what we want to be is already inside of us. So like, I want to be this thing. The only thing stopping me from being this thing is accepting that I am this thing.
You know, I'm really glad that you brought up these kinds of struggles. Because the truth is, things like injuries, like, yeah, this sucks. And it's putting a huge hamper on the things that I want to do. And it's frustrating and disappointing and all kinds of different emotions. But it's also like, I think, the outlier. Like, major injuries that take you out, I think, are the outlier when it comes to the struggles. Because, I mean, I've made it this long. I haven't been doing it as long as some, but it's like I've made it as long as I have done. And most of my struggles, I've had like 3 injuries, and this was by far the worst one. I dislocated my shoulder on a throw, and I rolled an ankle longboarding that took me out of training for a while. Those are really the only injuries that I've ever had, you know, and I feel like those, by comparison to the amount of struggle, are almost not worth including in the data, because they skew the data away from how much the actual struggle is internal all the time, and we face it all the time. So I'm kind of glad that you're bringing in that perspective, because right now this is at the front of my mind, and it's bigger than most things, but people have had way worse, right? Like massively worse than anything I'm going through.
Yeah, man,
and
but you know
people
what,
have
bro?
been, not to say it mean, but people have also been weaker. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to go at it. There's some people that it happens and they've already quit. They've already stopped. Or in my case, maybe they quit woodworking so that I'll tell you, when I rolled my ankle, it was the first time I ever longboarded. I rolled it like I was standing upright and my foot flipped entirely upside down. I was out for a couple months, and I never longboarded again. And it was a decision that I made, because I was like, what am I getting out of longboarding, and what did I lose when I had this injury? You know, but like this, I was like, man, I love woodworking too much to quit that. I'm not going to quit that. I'm not going to quit these other things. And there are people that wouldn't be able to do that just the event would have been enough to stop them and take that away, and or be something where it's way worse or way more long drawn out. But I honestly think that the kind of the silent struggles are way worse. The things, like you said, the stuff that brings in the value, your worth. And when you're watching people around you get promoted and you're not getting promoted, you're watching people around you excel and get better, and you're not excelling or getting better. And maybe you are, and maybe you aren't. Like we talked about, maybe you're just not seeing it in yourself, or maybe it's just not your time. Like, we have peaks and valleys in our training, and they don't always line up with the people near us. And sometimes people push way ahead, and we start feeling real bad about ourselves based on a metric that doesn't even make sense, because it's other people's progress.
Can I give you an example of something, right? So here's an example. So until I was listening to your latest podcast, I didn't realize I was kind of going, not minimizing the injury, but going, knowing you and how you have such a creative approach to your training. You'll be finding ways to train around it. Now, realizing that, of course, because of the position of the injury and the severity of it, any elevation in your blood pressure can actually affect the healing. I was going, oh man, I don't know what to do with that, to be totally honest. But I think, you know, we were talking about the emotional kind of, when you have an injury like this and you've kind of got into a framework of where martial arts is a part of your day, it's an actual lifestyle and a part of your practice. And when that is moved away, it amplifies all of these things. A friend of mine in Australia, a really good mate of mine, when I was talking on my podcast about my difficulties having a knee injury, he reached out after a couple of weeks I hadn't done any podcasts, and he said, just checking in to see if you're okay. He says, I know you try to be, you know, like, you in your mind, you're kind of going, oh, look, this is nothing. There are people worse off, but it's all proportional. And I think giving yourself the permission to be able to go, man, this really sucks. And sort of going, yeah, I'm actually going to, I'm going to play some Netflix, and I'm going to play some games, and I'm going to eat M&Ms out of my belly button, and I'm not going to do anything. And because it is, in a sense, allowing yourself that, and then kind of going, okay, I've done that. What's next? How do we not move through it? How do we accept it? And we because especially as male practitioners, we're always kind of like, you know, we're taught, it's a spirit of Buddha, and, you know, you persevere through and all these sorts of things, but also you apply some common sense to your practice as well. And I think the gift of something like this is that it gives us an opportunity to really clarify and take some time to think about what we do, as opposed to being so deep into it. We're just in the doing. It's kind of like my grandfather used to say that when you're on a trip, you go on a trip and you come back. So if you're gone for 2 days, it takes 3 days for your spirit and your intent to catch up with your body. So what's happening is when you do that sort of thing, like our intent and what we want to do kind of goes all over the place, it kind of blows away in the wind, and our sense of ourself and who we are. And how, I use martial arts to, if I'm going to a meeting or if I'm working with people, or if I have a stressful situation that I know that I'm going into, it helps me, it brings me to a specific place. The insecurity part of it and the injury part of it is that the dojo has to be a certain temperature for my core temperature to be up so I can get warm enough so that I can practice kata or do whatever with that with a minimum amount of pain. And, I'm sort of going, oh my gosh, you old fat bastard. What are you doing? What are you doing this for? You look ridiculous. And that is where the training is. That's the emotional makiwara. That's the emotional conditioning that we receive. That's the way in which we go, why is it that we have such an opportunity, like you talked about it, Ken, where we give people, we are there 100% for other people, for our students, for our friends, and we can forgive the shortcomings in others, but we cannot take them in ourselves. We don't treat ourselves like a friend. We treat ourselves like an enemy at times, or someone that needs to be disciplined, like a naughty child, from the 1960s. So I think injury amplifies, and it's important not to try and push away from that. I think it's important to bring it in and really get to grips with it and go, okay, here's the problem, here's what's going on, and then let's move through that. But first, you've got to be with it. Because that's where the damage happens. That's where you train too hard, you try too hard, you hurt yourself, and you end up paying a price.
Yeah, or maybe you never fully come back from it.
Right. Like I've I hate when people say things like, oh, it could always be worse. Like that doesn't help. That doesn't help at all. Like, or sugarcoating it, like saying, oh, well, there's always a positive out of it. Find the positive. Like, no, it's okay for this to be bad. It's okay for you to fully live in this moment and it be bad. That means that you are fully understanding it. You're fully knowing it.
You might even say that you haven't truly processed it if you don't go through some of that.
I agree. And martial arts is such a cool endeavor in that we learn that, or at least we approach that through training, right? So like we get to a point in class where we're so sore and exhausted and we're ready to give up, and then we decide, this is the way it should be. I should be sore. I should be exhausted. I should be tired. This is fine. So that your brain and your body literally looks at itself and goes, this is fine. We're fine. This is the way it should be. This is normal. This is bad. This sucks. Let's be in this moment. Let's be in this moment, and then let's go to the next moment. And, one thing that I love about martial arts too is there's so many aspects to it. So, as a martial artist, if we can't do the physical aspects, there are so many other aspects that we can practice. There's philosophical aspect, there's historical aspects, there's theory, there's curriculum progression that we can work on. There's so much to it. And I think that that's probably why I've never quit martial arts, because I don't get bored. I get bored very easily with everything, but I can't get bored with martial arts because there's never a stop of what I can do. Even if I do this in my journey, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to work on this now. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to work on this now. And that's just how my brain functions. So like when I do get into that point of, well, I can't do this. It's totally fine. I could do this. and then I'll be done and I'll go over and do this. And I don't know whether or not that exists in other things. I mean, I'm sure it does. I'm sure it exists in music. I'm sure it exists in some form of sports. I'm sure it exists.
Yeah.
But I think as a solo singular pursuit, like we were talking about earlier, I am not confined to what my teammates do. I can let people progress over here and do their thing and go over here and do this thing. There's nothing wrong with that. Because in the end, your karate, your martial art is yours, nobody else's.
I think that's one of the things that makes a singular pursuit so good, is the fact that in this particular case, or why it works that way, is group pursuits, like you said, are kind of held to the group standard. Singular pursuits, so you think of people who like are musicians, right? Like if they are not in a band necessarily, but just a singular musician, then they might get lost in the history of it, or studying a new technique, or finding a new way to do something. But when you include other people, it's easy for the group mentality to kind of shift you. So I'm learning every time I talk to you guys, I learn new things, and I feel like I'm learning more about how that singular solo practice done in a group has these benefits that don't necessarily exist in other things, because not because they can't, but because they're precluded by something else.
Right. Like if you are a part of a team, right? Let's say you're part of a bowling team, and you have a championship next week. Well, now your team can't win.
Right. You
right?
carry that pressure.
So like, and it's that team standard.
Yeah. You also can't choose to suddenly be like, well, I really want to work on specifically curving shots or something, and like, well, okay, you're not good at those, and we have a competition next week, so you need to shelve that because our group thing is more important than your thing. That definitely kind of changes what you can and can't do.
Whereas in martial, if you walk into class and you say, I really need to work on this, then you totally can. You can go over here and, and maybe there's another person who's like, you know what, I want to help you with that. And then you two can go over and do a drill, and you can work on that. And then the other people can go over and do a thing over here and work on it. And then later we can all get together and work on something that we all need to work on. It's such a it's such a beautiful environment. I love it. Go ahead, Tuari.
Totally agree. Actually, if I can, I have something that I'm just going to grab something really quick. I'm not leaving you. I'm just leaving the shop. Okay? So, show you something that I think ritual is really important. Creating a ritual. I found for me, what brings me comfort is routine, especially in training. There are certain non-negotiables for me in a day. And I'll give an example of when I was really struggling with my knee injury. I was kind of wondering if it was all worthwhile. I was, look, straight up, man. I was kind of on the cusp of getting into some suicidal ideation, straight up. I was kind of like, is it all worth it? Where's my value at? And then a friend of mine sent me this. And every time I kind of go through that, this is my touchstone. I go, hey, actually, someone thinks I'm pretty cool, and I help to create something positive. And I remember, okay, that's who I am. And Dan, when you were talking about, with injuries and things like that, sometimes I struggle with not sweating. Sometimes I struggle with not being a puddle of sweat and huffing and panting and lying on the floor and, oh my gosh, I'm feeling pain. Sometimes I train, I don't even sweat, to be totally honest with you. And that's really hard because I'm doing what I can, and I'm not, I'm used to really physical, pursuit of martial arts. But sometimes I train and I'm going, oh my gosh, shouldn't I be huffing and puffing and panting and, be sort of drenched in sweat, and there's a huge element of judgment for me in that of judgment, and then of course the temptation is to see myself as less than I am, and then to sort of filter everything through the injury, and then the injury which amplifies my negative self-regard, which then plays into how am I being perceived, how am I being a good teacher, how am I being a good example, and then it just is this rotating cycle. So what I find has worked for me is routine. So I'm going, what are the things that I can control in this space? So it's that, there's a famous acronym, the HALT acronym: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So I can control being hungry. I can control being angry. To a degree, I can control being lonely. And to a degree, I can control being tired. So what do I do? Hungry, eat. Angry, be angry. Angry is fine. Be angry at myself is fine. Don't be destructive. Don't hurt myself. Don't do things. Don't train in a way that kind of hurts me because I'm angry at me. Don't make my martial arts about a self-punishment. Lonely, reach out. Have the courage to reach out to people that you can be vulnerable with and that you can just have a real conversation with. Where you don't have to be Mr. Super martial arts guy, where you can go, actually, I'm just wondering, what's going on, and I'm having a real hard time and tired. I always found if I can look after the hungry and the tired, sometimes those other things kind of fall into place a lot better. So, and being for me, I see Dan, you're wearing a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle shirt, bro. I love my sci-fi. I love my comics. I love my nerddom. I'm proud to be that. That stuff keeps me creative and it inspires me and I have fun. This thing that we're doing is supposed to be fun. I get that we're doing something and it's all about, the importance of, one hit, one kill and all of those sorts of things. Well, I'm not doing martial arts to kill people. I'm doing martial arts because I want to live a quality of life and have people in my life, and I want to see my great-grandchildren, and I want to be a positive influence in my relationships and what I can bring. And I think the thing is that perhaps injury is an opportunity to ask ourselves some really serious questions. I mean, you talked, Ken, about the needing to rest. Well, maybe the needing to rest as you don't do is sitting down on the sofa with your wife and drinking some good coffee and going, how are you doing? And actually taking that moment to just be with each other, rather than go, I have to work to earn that moment. It's something, perhaps those moments are the things that we need to heal. You remember Godfather, or was it Godfather 3, which was not a great movie. I don't want to talk too much about it. But in it, there's a part in which Al Pacino's character, he goes to confession. And he talks about all these sort of, he does this big confession about, he killed his brother and whatnot and so on and so forth. And the priest says to him, when the spirit is in pain, the body cries out. So I'm a big believer that these things happen in a way that they are there to test us, but also there to clarify what is really important in our lives, I get to hang out with you guys. I get to hang out with you guys, get inspired. You guys are my insecurities. When I watch the things you guys do, I'm like, oh my God, I gotta lift my game on so many levels, and we were talking about Sal, Sal Balahi Sensei. You watch that guy move, and you watch that guy swing that mace, and you watch that guy do that stuff. I was like, what the hell? Michael Hagen Sensei, during the pandemic, he put out this excellent video on his Apex channel about how to rehab, how to train your hip, train your knee without injuring yourself. And Mikey, that was a lifesaver at the time. The number of times that I've sort of Dan, the stuff that you did with the Weapons Museum and all that sort of stuff, just going, man, what an incredible application of martial arts in a positive way. And of course, Ken, there's everything that you do, bro. That's kind of benchmarks. And I'm going, man, I get to hang with these dudes, right? Yeah. I get to hang out with them. I'm just going, but your win is my win. Your injury, when I heard about your injury, I was going, I think everyone, all of us, all of your friends just went, because we were feeling for you. But honestly, man, I think that, you know, this is something, and people say, oh, it happens for a reason. I don't think it happens for a reason. I think it happens because it happens. But I think how we, you know, to do a little bit of Jedi, you know, your focus determines your reality. Boom! Star Wars reference.
So what I think is my biggest takeaway from this conversation is community. We talked about the solitary, the personal pursuit, the singular pursuit of Marshall. But what truly binds us together is community. Not that we all do the same thing, but that we all do the same thing. And that we can see each other in solidarity and say, I know you. I get you. I feel that. And I think that is a beautiful aspect to our...
And so incredibly important. Like we could go, especially, you know, the three of us, you know, and many others could like have trained long enough. Anybody who's trained long enough could go and just train alone. It wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't have the same impact. And it certainly wouldn't provide the healing that it does. You know, one of the things that's kind of on my mind right now, especially after what Tuari just said, you know, you brought up the plaque. And, you know, it's like you mentioned for a second, like that happened for a reason. And yeah, maybe it didn't happen for a reason, but things happen when they're meant to. And like that one, I didn't truly know what was going on with you at the time. It took me a long time to get those made, like a long time to make them, and then to get addresses, and then to ship them. And then it took an incredibly long time for it to actually make it to you specifically because of the post and the way that worked. And it landed on your doorstep the day that it did. By no fault of my own. I certainly didn't try to do that. And where I'm going with all of that is we really don't know. Like we're talking about struggle. We really don't know when people are struggling. Like unless we are open with each other, we really don't know. We could be right next to somebody who's struggling so hard and like in a big way, in a life-changing kind of way, or just having a really hard day. And we don't know that. We might not have a way to know that. And so, you know, maybe I kind of want to take some of this moment for the people who are, for the three of us and the people who are end up watching this, you know, that maybe we take it on ourselves sometimes and check in with people and recognize that we don't always know. And sometimes it's just worth asking. Even if you don't have a sense of why you're asking, just, you know what, I haven't checked in with you in a minute. And maybe today I ask you, and today is the day you needed to hear that somebody wanted to know.
Yeah. Yep.
Totally. And I appreciate the fact that, you know, you guys have been that. And I think, you know, in our kind of chat group with the Mando chat, you know, those guys are exactly the same. Like people like Josh Simmers, you know, Michael Hagan, those guys do incredible work. You guys do incredible work. We get to sort of hang out. I mean, for me, one of the blessings of the pandemic, you could say there was such a thing, was creating this incredible, being part of this incredible community, which I'm always honored to be part of. And I think when it comes to injury, and I think when it comes to doubting ourselves, and I think when it comes to comparing ourselves to others, it's really important to find people who tell you what you need to hear, but also it's all right to say, hey, I'm not believing in myself at the moment. Can I borrow your belief in me for a while until mine kicks in? You know, and whether it's an injury, a physical, a mental, a spiritual, a relationship injury, and that also translates to how we deal with things like grief, losing jobs, losing people we love, the end of relationships, the changing relationships. You know, having the courage to do things which are really, really uncomfortable. That's where this resilience can really kick in because we're stepping into something really uncomfortable. And we have this innate sense of, I'm not worthy of support and my problems don't amount to anything. And it's just, I'm being silly. You know what? When our number comes up and number comes
permission,
up.
you sent me a message. You sent me a message the other day and you were just like, you know what, dude, it's okay to be pissed. Like at the time I wasn't pissed and I generally am not too much of a person to get pissed, but it was just good to know that it was like, it's okay if I need to. And even by virtue of that permission, it's okay if I feel different emotions, not just that one. And I think there's a whole lot of it being really important that it is okay. You mentioned that, like these things, we're going through these things and just recognizing that we do need that minute and that it's okay to take that minute and that it's okay to go through those things. I've heard it from both of you as we've talked. It's like these things are happening. They are real. They're not going anywhere. You're dealing with them. And it's okay that is happening. And we need to be able to give each other that permission for when the times come that we can't give ourselves that permission. And especially if you are older in the martial arts or romantic in the martial arts, because there are very cool nostalgic parts of the martial arts and especially if you're a guy, I can't speak to the woman side of things because I'm not one, but it's like, Tuari, you mentioned it earlier, like there is kind of this pressure to suck it up, get through it, do all of this stuff. Like just having this conversation, there's probably people in the martial arts world watching this going, who are these namby-pamby, like nobody on my mat would be like that, be talking about this stuff and saying it's okay. That's not okay. And there's been, it's a generational thing, right? Like there have been generations of especially traditional martial arts that have created like this needs to not be this way. And okay, I mean, sometimes we need that. There times we need that. Some people are that way, but then if you're not that way, if you don't need that, then sometimes that in itself can be a trauma you don't realize you're carrying, a thing that is changing your life that you're not dealing with because you were surrounded by people who told you it's not okay to feel that way. Dude, it's not okay to cry about that. It's not okay to, you shouldn't be taking a break. You should be.
Who's having an emotion? Take it outside.
Why don't you just get some duct tape and get back on the mat? I don't know, like that limb will hold on for a while.
Yeah.
Put the arm in the ice and we'll get it attached later.
It's not smelling so good, but let's just wash it. It's not smelling so good, but they can put that. They can.
There's only 20 minutes left. You can make it
through
20
minutes.
Goes
back to that whole, are we what we want to be, right? And then like, what do we really want to be? Do we want to be a superhero? Like Superman's got kryptonite. Like it sucks. There's problems, right? Like if he gets hit with kryptonite, he is in immense amount of pain, and he doesn't go, it's okay, I'm fine. Like what we want to be, what we think that we want to be, we already are. We just have to be okay with the negatives to it.
And can I take a split second to say, for the people who don't know what they want to be, who haven't figured that out, that's freaking fine too. Like, if you don't know, you'll figure it out. Like, who you want to be, it changes. Maybe it doesn't. And if you don't feel like you know what that is, who cares? Like, you'll get
sometimes
there.
It's important to know what you don't want to be.
It takes time. Sometimes you got to figure it out.
Yeah, you've got to. Sometimes you go, look, I don't have a particular plan. I just kind of go with, I just know who I don't want to be and how I don't want to act. Like, I mean, I'll give you an example. For me, taking on matora, our traditional, our traditional custom of face tattooing, you guys were so incredibly supportive. I've had some really negative reactions to it, but it's quite a common thing here in New Zealand. But the support and just sort of the kind of, just the really honest friendship and sort of, the encouragement that I've had kind of for a while there. Wasn't ashamed of it, but I was like going, how is this going to land? And there was a little bit of anxiety there for me. But I mean, all of you guys have just been like, so supportive of it. And I had some anxiety around that, but I think that bro, at a certain point, we all have that instructor that we go, thanks for teaching me who I don't want to be. I remember I had this particular sensei, and her whole focus on martial arts and her whole focus on she would say before she would come to a class, what do I need to be in order to serve this class? Every time she came to class, she would go, who do I need to be of service to this class? And she was an incredibly powerful martial artist in a range of disciplines. I mean, we're not talking like 2 weeks of Taekwondo. We're talking about a sixth dan in Aikido, a sixth dan in karate, and lived in Japan. And she was just an incredible martial artist. But even with that, all of that, and she also had a prosthetic leg later in her career, but her mindset never changed. Her thing was always like, how can I be of service to my students? And I'm going, my gosh, she was just this amazingly powerful, positive person who, when she was in a motorbike accident which necessitated an amputation, and look, she took it hard. She took it really hard. She said, I kicked and I screamed, and she made a joke about it. She said, I kicked, but only one leg. I screamed, I did this and that. And she had this really kind of dark sense of humor about it. But you know what? She got up and she rehabbed, and she had moments, but she continued to train right up until her passing. And that's the kind of person I want to be. That's the kind of legacy that I want to live up to. I see people all the time, and I'm going, I look at physical skills, and I look at people like in the Filipino martial arts, like Doug Marqueda and all those guys that are just these machines of perfection. Katori Shintoryu, when I look at the swordsmanship of, Otaki Sensei and all those kind of people like that. And when I look at, all these incredible martial arts, I mean, don't get me started about the Gracies and all these incredible BJJ practitioners out there. You're going, oh yeah, I'm not rolling with those guys ever. But the thing is, you can choose to use it as fuel on your fire to continue to try and be where you feel you want to go, or you can use it as a bonfire to burn your dreams and hopes and aspirations. And that's what an injury is. An injury it's either a spur or it's fuel for a fire that only burns one person, and that's ourselves.
How do you guys feel that the struggles are different or not different as instructors?
Oh, dude. I mean, I can tell you that. Well, so I've been teaching since I was 17. So I've been a teacher for longer than I've been I've always been a student, but I mean, for just student versus teacher and student, I've been a teacher student longer than I have not been. My biggest issue with that is teaching is a part of who I am, right? We talked about this before from a martial arts standpoint, like this is who you are, it is what you do. I can't not teach. I've tried, actually. I've tried doing other things. I can't not teach. It's impossible for me. But teaching, there are many ways to teach. And sometimes if you can't teach in the same way that you have taught, you have to then figure out another way to teach. One of my best coaches ever, he was a fencing coach, didn't do anything. He kind of sat in the stool and just kind of like, gave encouragement, but he would say things in ways that really like made light bulbs go off. And he would kind of like talk about, angles, and he would talk about timing, and he would talk about these things, and it changed a lot of the way that I approached my fencing, approached my martial. without even really doing anything. Like, I never saw the guy fence in his life. Like, I never, right? So like I think that there's a difference between doing martial and teaching martial. I think that the primary thing that we do as teachers is we walk this path, and our students are on this path with us. And sometimes, you know, we get to a point on the path where we just have to sit in the canoe and go downstream. And that's just part of the path, right? I think the hardest part for us as teachers is always thinking that we have to be somewhere else on the path. Maybe we have to be back at the beginning where they're learning how to lace up their shoes, their hiking boots, right? Where they're getting their gear on. Like, maybe we have to be back there. There are some people who, way up the mountain, they've found that they have to learn how to scale a rock wall, right, Sal? They have to do this rock wall, and then they realize, oh gosh, you know, I have to make sure that these people know how to climb a rock wall. So they go all the way back to the beginning of the path, and they go to these people who are just getting their gear together, and they're like, listen, I need to teach you how to scale this rock wall, because up the way, you know, you're going to have to do this. And so so you spend all this time teaching people how to scale a rock wall, and then you're like, all right, let's go down the path. And you get to this stream or this river, and then, you know, you get into your boat, but they don't have a boat. And you go, oh, that's right. You're supposed to learn how to, you know, carve a boat now, right? Like, I forgot about that. So like, we have to kind of remember that we're on this
so good
path, but the path is not always going to be where you think it will be. So it's okay. It's okay to be and still teach. You can still help these people by sitting in the canoe and relaxing and taking your time and helping them get their gear together. Helping them, you know, learn what's north and what's south, and learning how, you know, to tell whether or not, you know, where the sun is and what time it is. And like, I mean, like, there's so many ways that you can help teach people on the path. You don't always have to be climbing the rock.
I've been thinking a lot about that lately from maybe an opposite side a little bit. Because my headspace has been on that rock wall, right? Like, I'm running into, fascinated by some rock walls right now. And, you know, so then when I work with those people that are getting their gear together, maybe not specifically going back, be like, you got to know about this, but instead being like, I want to think about this. I want to explore this. I want to spend time with this, but this is not for you, but I'm having a really hard time not trying to show it to you.
Yep.
And for me, part of that has been coming to terms with the idea of going, maybe I need a trail guide who starts at the beginning, and I hang out with the people who make it to the rock wall, because that's where I'm at right now. And, you know, and then struggling with, but then am I letting people down? You know, am I being too full of myself to spend time over here when I should be? You know, am I neglecting those people because of this or that? Or what's the best approach? Do I set that aside and do I sit in the canoe, or do I become really good at rock walls and go, hey, when the time comes,
do them all.
You'll come talk to me about rock walls.
Do them all.
And yeah, right? And yeah, you gotta, I think we go through these different phases, and all of them need their own.
That's the hardest part about being a teacher, is knowing how to do them all at the right time with whoever's in front of you.
When?
Be okay with getting the gear together.
I'm kind of like, I'm reminded of another movie reference, if I may. A young Denzel Washington, Gene Hackman. The name of the submarine movie is, anybody?
Hunt for Red October? No.
Crimson
Tide?
Hunt for Red October. Let's go. Crimson Tide. So,
Good movie, though.
and what he's talking about, they're having this conversation, they're doing this great dialogue, and they're talking about the dictatorial nature of Gene Hackman's style of command.
Mm-hmm.
And Gene Hackman turns to him and says, hey, we're here to preserve democracy, not practice it. You know? So sometimes we have to realize that we are not the prototype, that we are not the example in terms of physical technique. Sometimes, we give ourselves a break because we want to be the guide. We want to be the person that they can, we feel it's our responsibility. We have to be some kind of perfect articulation of what we're trying to teaching, or we're saying, look, I'm further on the road. The true meaning of the word sensei. We're just a bit further on the path, but we're all walking in the same direction, just at different speeds. And I think that, oftentimes we kind of get into this, I know I'm a perfectionist by nature. I don't like to do things I'm not good at. I'm always frightened to do things that I don't pick up immediately. And for me, I think the statement is that, we all have those teachers we've all had those teachers, those sensei that have made mistakes, or those middle managers, or those area managers, or whatever, who can't admit a mistake and will find some ridiculous reason as to why that wasn't a mistake. There was a test and you passed it, or you didn't pass it. We have to live in our mistakes, right? We have to live in our mistakes. And maybe the thing is at times, that's where allowing our vulnerability to show is what's needed. I can't do this. I've got a Sensei John Marable, who's seventh dan in Okinawa Kempo, sixth or seventh. I'm pretty sure he's a seventh dan. As a paraplegic, has been one since he was, I want to say, 16, 17. And has an encyclopedic knowledge of Goju-ryu karate. Has taught some of the best martial artists in terms of Goju-ryu karate, Okinawan Goju-ryu that I've ever seen. He can't do the stances, but he can tell you how to do them. Mm-hmm. So the point is he sees himself as a conduit, not a bus station in a sense. He's not the destination. He's just pointing the direction. It's that whole thing of good teachers tell you where to look, not what to see. Mm-hmm. And I think for me of late, I've been basing things around my own training. Like I do a lot of chair training and things like that. But I think, to be honest about that, says I'm really struggling with this. It's okay to not be great at something, but I'm going to do what I can. Mm-hmm. So maybe don't look at me as the example. Maybe look at me as someone who's trying to do the best they can, and you do the best you can. And if the best you can do is being better than me, then I've done my job. Your job is not to be us. Your job is to surpass us and to extend the art and to develop it. Like when you were talking before, Dan, about the whole, whether or not you feel that your sensei, your instructors will be proud of what you do. For me, I've kind of gotten to a point where I suppose it's not that I'm so good and I'm so fantastic that I know what I do is fantastic, but I'm not looking for father figures, and I'm not looking for I'm not looking for masters. I'm looking for colleagues who can give me honest and open critique. Yeah. I'm not so good that I don't need it. I'm not sort of setting myself up as some kind of Dorian, because I'm certainly not. But I think what happens is we get to a certain point where we need to own what we do in all its ugliness, and all its kind of ineptitude and all those sorts of things, and all the mistakes that we make. That's okay. The problem is when we continually seek validation. And I'm not saying this about you, Dan. I'm talking about myself.
You're speaking validation right here. No, and it's funny because when I left my previous organization, I had reached out to quite a few people about the possibility of maybe learning a different art or joining a different organization or doing something. And almost universally, everybody would tell me pretty much the same thing. Do you need another dad? Do you need another teacher? Do you need and almost universally, people are just like, I thought you were this person. And I'm like, oh God, yeah. But again, it's that imposter syndrome. I don't want to be the man in charge. And I'm struggling with that right now because, the group that I did create, I don't want to be that man. And so I'm trying as hard as I can to make sure that that doesn't happen. But it might. I don't know. It might, but I don't want it to. And then, I've had people tell me, well, that's why you should be. Like, I don't like that. It's just.
But let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question on that then. Is it a question of you don't want to be that person? I mean, because one, I would ask you, what does that person entail for you? Because it sounds like you have this idea about who that person is, right? But also too, which is not you. Like the fact that you don't want to be that, is it a question of respecting other people's journeys, or your idea that you're on some level an imposter and not worthy of guiding people on that path?
I really think it's both. I mean, like, I want to have a group where people are comfortable with shining themselves. I want people to be able to be free to talk, be free to show what they're amazing at. I want other people to go to those people and say, I want to learn what you're doing over here. I want more information about what's happening here. Your school is huge. What are you doing business-wise? Like, I want to go to you. I want to do these things. I don't want to create an organization where it's a pyramid and I'm up here, or anybody's up here. I don't want anybody to be up there. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that that's healthy. I don't think that a martial arts organization should work that way nowadays. So, like, the initiative is really, for me, it's I want to create a community, like we were talking about before, where people support each other in every way possible that they can in the realm of martial arts, not just within one style, not just within one set of focus, but fully. And so if everybody just kind of like looks at me, then that doesn't happen, or it's almost. It won't happen naturally. And I want it to happen naturally. So that's really kind of the struggle there.
And that's kind of where, with injuries, like as we're talking about with injuries, those are the things that get amplified by the injuries because we go through all these kind of scenarios about all the people that we're letting down, all the people we're not being this role model to. I know I certainly struggle with it. There's a number of times where I have thrown my toys completely out, where I've had little tantrums and felt very sorry for myself. And that was kind of like we talked about, that was part of the process. But I think, you have to think about people, those examples of martial artists and people and athletes that have worked up until, had serious illnesses, terminal illnesses, that they have worked and done the thing that they wanted to do, that run that marathon or had those meetings or wrote that book or did the speech, and we're gone a few days later. So I kind of feel like I don't get a choice in it. I feel like I have to do the thing which scares me. And what scares me now is because I'm going, oh my gosh, how much have I depended upon my physicality? How much have I depended upon my perceived power that I now feel vulnerable? And what's that vulnerability about? The vulnerability is really about believing I only have value if I have this. I only have value if I can do this. And with students and being a teacher and things like that, we get an opportunity to, for a moment, to teach a kid how to do a break fall, who may come and train for 2 weeks, but a couple of weeks later or a year later, or when they're in their 20s or 30s, they get hit by a car and they know how to hit the ground, so it saves their head. We're helping people, that we will, in ways that we will never see, and that is a privilege. Everyone who comes through the door, the goal is for us to impart something that has greater application than just whether or not they can punch or kick or grapple or strike or use a weapon. It's how they apply it in their lives. And I think with injuries, it's how to keep things in perspective. Like, can you talk about, a lot of your videos and a lot of your content is around, one of the things I really applaud and I find quite scary is that you put stuff up about your training sessions. Without fancy camera angles and all that sort of stuff, you put stuff up of you rolling and getting pinned and doing, the Filipino martial arts and practicing your karate and doing Kobudo, like in the raw. Like for me, that's an intimidating thing because I just see how ugly my technique and what I do is. That's what exists in my mind. Whether or not that's the truth, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that is I want you to know that I feel the same things, right? I put it up anyway. Like I do it anyway. In fact, there was one that I posted just recently of rolling in Saratoga, which I rolled awful. Everybody was amazing, and I learned a lot from everybody. So I looked terrible, right? Like why would you go look at that? But there it is, go put it out there. But the truth is, I feel the same way. I go, great. How many people are going to be like, why am I subscribed to this again? This is the guy.
Yeah.
But that's why. Know, but that's why I'm a subscriber. That's why I'm a subscriber.
That's part of why I do it. Is there's an honesty to it that is hard. It's scary to do. To just be honest and go, here it is. Let the internet pick it apart. But I do value that I can look at people and go, hey, you want to know who I am? You can go look. Especially jiu-jitsu. That's the thing I'm the weakest at, right? And people come in and they get to learn from a blue belt because I'm a blue belt running a jiu-jitsu school, and I get to go, I'm like, man, you can go watch my blue belt test if you want. I could have done a lot better, but there it is. You can go watch the whole thing. And there is a freedom in that, but it does not come without the anxiety and the fear and the thing. I'm glad that you mentioned this because when you mentioned the physicality and, who am I without that? And do I still have value? That was something that you mentioned in our chat that prompted this entire call, was this idea of when we do such physical things and they are who we are, not even necessarily that we meant to make ourselves that thing, but we do that thing so much that it just is who we are because it's just what we do all the time, that you do wonder sometimes, if I can't do that, who am I? Am I still someone? You mentioning that was a very kind of vulnerable moment, and I really appreciated it. And if I can reflect that a little bit, you both had something to say. Dan, you've got this wonderful, wonderful idea of how an organization should work and how the martial arts should work. How we should be a peer group. We should be colleagues with each other, and we should be able to do this, and we should celebrate each other for being good at what we're good at. And Tuari, you mentioned the idea of a good teacher, shows you where to look, but not what to see. And I love these things, and I believe these things, and I believe them so strongly. They're like at the center of things that I think about all the time. But then real talk, being honest, I also struggle to act on them in my own life, to do them. Like I want to accomplish them, but then there's that real fear of, well, if you can do all of this without me, at what point do I become not important? What if my value isn't here? And I could easily see coming from that being a person who is not moving themselves forward in any way. That should be a real fear. I think if you're not moving yourself forward, then yeah, your value will diminish over time. And I'm not doing that. I'm continuing to do that. So I'm like, I have value, and I see that I have value. But then I also look around. There's some days class shapes up where I can break people out into groups, and this person's working with those people, and that person's working with those people. And I'm like, I don't even need to be here. Then you go, man, what if I really didn't need to be here? Like, these guys are doing so great. I mean, they have this knowledge. They can do this stuff. They can share this. They can pass it on to these people. These people are learning so wonderfully. They can become wonderful. Do I have a value here? Am I providing something?
Dude,
and of course I know.
Doesn't it come back to
of course I know that I am.
Seeds, man. Right? We're all trying to plant seeds. I mean, I don't give a lot of thought to legacy and things of that sort of nature. I'm not going, well, when I'm gone, I want people to remember me and have my photo at the front of the dojo. I don't care because I'll be gone. The point is that what I hope is that people will get to a point where they take ownership of themselves. I love the fact that martial arts can do that, that people can feel, I mean, Dan, you and I have talked about it quite a bit. I was, an outsider as a kid. I went from a predominantly Polynesian community into a non-Polynesian community where the fact that I was indigenous was brought up in every negative way that you can possibly imagine. But, and for me, that movie Moana that's been so popular with the kids, a few years back, and my middle name's Maui. So, and one of the things that we attribute to Maui, and that was not a great depiction of him, just FYI. But one of the things which I really love about him as a value is that Maui is famous in Polynesian culture. Wherever you go in Polynesia, there's Maui stories. And one of the powers that Maui had was that he could change his shape. And he's used as a metaphor for becoming whatever the situation demands of me, to respond to the living moment as it shapes itself in front of you. And we try to do that through martial arts. We go, okay, I'm not a great grappler, but I can grapple. So I'm not a stranger in a foreign land if I go to the ground. If there's a pool cue or something like that, I'm not a great kendoka or a great escrima practitioner, but I can swing a stick. I can punch, I can kick, I can this and that. I'm not fantastic at it, but the thing is that I'm trying to become more like Maui, and that I change my shape to adapt to a situation. And that's what we're talking about with our students. When you look at your students and you go, oh my gosh, it's not that they don't need you, it's that doing what you have trained them to do. And it's important for a moment to actually have some pride in that and actually go, that is really cool. That is a beautiful moment. And also it speaks about your role as sensei, and that you don't define yourself by keeping other people down, by trying to become this oracle. Dan, I wonder if that's what you're talking about, the idea of, not being perceived as an oracle. Because, I mean, who's got the time, the energy to be the best, And I think that, when it, coming back to the injury, I think it's about resilience. It's about changing our shape. It's about adaptability. It's about vulnerability. And it's about not being shackled to this idea of who we have to be, but responding in the moment in a healthy and somewhat honest, well, not somewhat, but honest, authentic way. That's what martial arts is about to me. And like you said, some people are going to look at the three of us and go, "Oh man, look at these touchy feelies." I'm going, if that is touchy feely, then I'm in. I am in. I'm subscription paid, man. I'm not trying to be.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be what you need me to be. I can only be what I have to be. And who the people who matter to me is my partner, my children. If they love me and they are proud of me, that's all I need. If they are protected and I'm doing something which benefits our life, that's all I care about. At the end of the day, of course, I want to be validated. Of course, I want people to like what I do. But, at the end of the day, man, do you really give that much of a shit? Do they impact your life so much that we need to seek them and aggrandize and humble ourselves? I will humble myself to the people that I love and the people who are deserving of respect. And part of that is this humbleness around this injury, a serious injury, and people will look at it and go, "Oh, you've just cut your finger." But I mean, man, this is a serious injury impacting on so many things. I mean, man, aren't you writing with your left hand now?
I try not to because it's really bad.
Luckily, we don't write a whole lot in our culture anymore. It's mostly digital.
Get a lot more typing.
But dude, I mean,
yeah. You learn a lot about what is available for the left-handers.
Yeah.
I feel for the left-handers.
At least your sword hand is still good. It's beautiful. Yeah. Well,
Got that left pinky.
I want to mention one thing when it comes to your struggle with your students needing you. And I don't know whether or not everybody else feels the same way or what, but I've come to at least in my own experience, I've come to an understanding that what I teach is not mine. What I give to the student is not mine. As soon as I teach somebody to do a technique, it's gone from me. It is now theirs. No matter what, I can't take it back. I cannot. There are no refunds.
Can't take it back.
On learning martial art. None. So.
None. I agree with that so much. So I say it differently. I agree with it a lot because to me, I've never taught anybody anything. And because you have to process it. I can present it. I can give it to you in ways that are perfect for you to understand because they happen to be the way you learn or whatever, and it comes at the right time or whatever. Everything can go right. And it still has to pass through yourself for you to understand it, to process it, to put it to work. And so in a sense, I mean, it was never mine to begin with because I couldn't make what you have. Because for you to have made it, it is yours.
Once you do that, and then they take that and they train it, and they pass it on to somebody else, yes, they don't need you anymore. However, they will never forget you for it. So your value will never diminish because you were, as Tuari said earlier, the seed. But again, it's not yours anyway. So don't stress about it as if it was.
Yeah, it's not, and it was never meant to be. You know, I think it's that dichotomy, right? Like you're like it's not meant. Like I know all that stuff, I believe all that stuff. Like it should be for other people. Like it should not. I get your idea of I don't want to be at the top, and if for no other reason, then you don't want to be at the top because part of that implies that other people will hold themselves back because you're there. Just the fact that you're there will stop them from even seeking to be their own selves inside of the thing. And, but it definitely is a thing that even if you believe it, even if you know it's right, even if you are pursuing it and you want it to be true, you still sometimes have to struggle with processing that you have to also be a part of that, and that it's okay for you to want it to be true, believe it's true, think it's true, and still not be 100% on board because you're still
honestly,
dealing with your
that
own
may never
self.
happen, and that's okay.
It may not.
Too.
Probably won't.
Maybe we at somewhere on that path, there's something that will help in some way make that easier. But maybe something on the path will make it harder. I don't know. As long as we support each other and help each other, then I think there's a bright future there. If we, as I've seen in the past with martial arts communities, if we fight each other, then it's just going to be this group versus this group. We do it right. No, we do it right. You all suck. And then these people come in and go, you both suck. Like that's not healthy, and that's not how we should do it anymore.
I hope if anything comes out of this conversation today for people is two things. I hope people realize that they're not alone in having these thoughts and going through these struggles and dealing with their own progress and maybe their injuries, maybe their own self-doubt or value or self-validation or the validation of their peers, and that these things, that it is felt by everyone, and that it doesn't stop there, and it can pass. And it's natural for it to come, and it's just as natural for it to go, and it's going to continue to do so in random cycles forever.